The following video contains elitism, memes, and a verbal beatdown. Hi guys, Iggy here. A while ago I was watching the Was Next 4-Day Really That Hard video, and a lot of the points in it are just so bad. I can stay silent no more. Allow me to educate you. Wow, with 1.7 million views, he must really have a lot of knowledge on this topic.
I was in one of the top raiding guilds on the Frostmain server called Legio Excisio.
Great! I can't wait to hear about all the bosses he killed.
I feel somewhat proud to be part of that, that handful of guilds who actually managed to kill some bosses in that godforsaken place.
Wait, some bosses? Well, I'm sure he killed at least some of the harder ones.
This screen is not from my guild.
Well, Four Horsemen was kind of hard. It was basically the third last boss in the instance. I'm sure he killed the basic gear check Patchwork.
Once again, not my guild. We didn't kill Patchwork, but we didn't kill Patchwork.
Well, perhaps they went a non-traditional route and killed other bosses first. I'm sure they got quite a few down.
I think we killed Anubricon, Instructor Azuvius, and one more.
I'm guessing the one more would have been Grand Widow Faralina, the next boss in the Spider Wing, which was seen as the next easiest, who frankly has many abilities seen in previous raid tiers. You know, maybe they had attrition, they brought in some players who weren't up to snuff. I wonder how their AQ40s went.
And in AQ40 we got to Cthulhu before Naxx40 came out.
Hey, not bad. They saw every boss in the instance.
Because we didn't get to Cthulhu. We got to Twin M's, and then we didn't get past Twin M's. We didn't get further than Twin M's.
Now, don't bring up things like the hardest instances. I'm sure his guild used to be really good.
Like Nefarian and some other bosses that were just ridiculously hard. Black Malaret for us was tough as hell too.
Are you sure about that?
You know, early Blackwing Lair, early Molten Core, it was pretty goddamn hard.
It's really so stupid.
It's not like he doesn't know the name of the bosses.
Let me give you an example, such as the Locust Swarm of Anubricon.
It's almost like he was just making this crap up. Remember, they killed 3 bosses. They never made it to 4 horsemen.
Hell, even the 4 horsemen fight, you needed 8 geared tanks. 8! I remember in my guild, we actually had to try and steal geared tanks from other guilds. We didn't do the 4 horsemen. Did we actually? Not 1, not...
And how can we take your word on the whole video when you don't even remember if you killed the second hardest boss? I'm sure he wasn't a scrub who tried content he was under-geared for.
I threw it there with the 5-8 Storm Rage, 3-8 Cenarian, Hide of the Wild, and I think that's the Will of Arlok from Zugaru. That was my raiding gear, basically.
Right.
Well, at least he played Resto. I'm sure he was carrying his guild.
I actually went balanced later in the game. And I actually raided a few times with balance.
I don't see how this can get any worse.
I grinded with Pharaoh gear, but in resto spec. Because I didn't want to respec. I did next to no DPS. Killing mobs was horribly slow.
You disgust me. Go on.
Most guilds attempted Naxx40 on weekends, so...
And how the hell would you know that, Nostradamus? Well, at least he doesn't have any stupid ideas.
Dual spec, I would have loved to have that in vanilla. That would have been great.
It would have been horrible, and here's why. The way you spec'd yourself was extremely important. You weren't just a rogue, you were a subtlety rogue. You were a hemo rogue. You were a dickbag rogue, right? You could be a shaman. Hey, I'm not in a hardcore raiding guild. I don't need Mana Tide Totem that badly. I can have the extra point in Elemental, and I'll be more viable in PvP situations. Your choices mattered. That's a good thing. No changes.
One person standing in the wrong spot means he will do damage to all the other players with a different charge, and it's so much damage that that one guy can wipe half the raid in less than a few seconds.
Why the
You lying? Why you always lying?
It's not like Nax triggered him and caused intense bias.
It's almost like I have PTSD from old Naxxramas in that godforsaken place. Lots of memories there, but not all of them were really great. Nax40 just destroyed our guild.
So he's not qualified.
Okay, you call a plumber up. He shows up, and he goes, yeah, I think the leak's coming from the upstairs bathroom. We need to shut it up, blah, blah. Then all of a sudden his wife walks in, who isn't a plumber. And then goes, oh, you know, I'm actually thinking it's kind of... Wouldn't you be like, with all due respect, shut the up. I need a plumber in this moment.
I never did hardcore Battlegrounds. I never did hardcore RP in Goldshire. So I will refrain from talking on those. You should do the same. So why can I talk? I rated hardcore. 14th worldwide Kill the Zod Kill Lost Anarchy near Zul. Lich King played with the legendary guild The Seven. They're the guild that killed Illidan in tier 3 gear. I know what I'm talking about. I've played high pressure endgame. Paladin, first worldwide tier 2 judgment set. Healed the main tank on Patchwork. Kited ads on Gluth. I was the guy behind the DCing healer who was there to lay on hands. He doesn't have the experience to make this video. I didn't want to make this video. I didn't want to be the douchebag again. But where are the content creators? SFAND, Stay Safe, Tips, where are you? Maybe they don't have the experience to debunk this because they played on private servers. They weren't there. And then you have people like Asmonbald who watch this and, oh, true. It's not true. There's so much wrong with this video, and you shouldn't be spreading the misinformation.
Keep in mind that all these raids I just mentioned were 40-man raids, and every boss dropped an average of 3 epics.
He's complaining about having to share items with his guildies, and this is a very, very bad mentality, and it's likely why his guild was shit and never cohesed to where they could actually progress far into Nax.
That's mine!
You needed to view it as a team game, and yes, you got loot. So, hey, I'm a paladin, and my other paladin, Married, got shoulders over me. He can now heal better. Our raid is stronger, bosses become easier. That is a good thing.
Those 3 items on average had to be split over a 40-man raid group.
3 was probably average for Molten Core. Later on, bosses dropped quest items, etc., etc. However, he doesn't take into account BOE drops and BOP drops. So in Molten Core, if you remember, tier 1 would drop from trash mobs. You could buy, sell, trade them. So you were actually getting more loot than you're talking about. And then, of course, there was the crafted items like Nightfall and whatnot. Are you going to count that as a boss drop? Probably not. Yet things from the instance can craft those. Disingenuous. And scarcity of loot was a good thing. It was like, yes. I remember I got Judgment Bracers from Molten Core back when tier 2 dropped there. They were shitty. They gave almost no stats. I was so fucking proud. I was like, yes, I'm awesome. When you got loot, it mattered. Now it's like, hey, look, loot. Okay, thanks.
So there were a total of around 60 to 70 people in that guild. 60 to 70 is a little bit far-fetched once again. It's not 60, 70. That's a little too much.
That's like 15 to 20 people more than you actually had. Disingenuous. That's like girls on MySpace.
Look at my gear, by the way. This was also, I think, one of the first raids I joined. Piece of shit gear. It was horrible. And I still got the raid Black Moon there, so I don't know what my guild was thinking. I don't know why they just said to me, "No, just gear up, you idiot." "23 guilds managed to clear the entire raid, which is less than 0.1% of the entire US player base."
His number is extremely misleading. A recent Reddit post shows 124 guilds having killed Kel'Thuzad. Now that's worldwide. His number was only US. However, I'm sure many other guilds have killed Kel'Thuzad. They just don't care about random internet dick points. These are self-reported. Now, if you add in the numbers that have killed 4 horsemen, which a lot of guilds got stuck on because of the 8 tank cock block, I'm sure this would be extremely high. He's showing it as low as possible for outrage, and we're not buying it, dude.
So why were there so few guilds and players that cleared the entirety of Naxxramas?
He says the low player completion of Nax was due to the prerequisite raid gear, aka farming previous raid tiers, consumables, and resistance gear. He says that was the cock block, when in reality, it's very far from the case. It's because Nax was released in 20th of June, and in October, they released the TBC announcement, so people knew there was a gear reset coming. People didn't want to bother recruiting and grinding hard just to have all that gear go to waste. Now, you also have to keep in mind, Naxx was a huge jump up in difficulty from AQ40. AQ40, albeit somewhat hard, it had some mechanics like the Huhuran poison, twin imps tanking, you had to have, raids moving around, not chaining the beam on Cthulhu. Compare that to Naxx. There was so much more going on in Naxx. There was a lot of individual, I screw up, I wipe the raid type of deals. If the Burning Crusade was announced in, say, February, a lot more guilds would have progressed through Naxx. Take that to the bank.
13 years after I first stepped foot in Naxxramas. 13 years after we couldn't clear one wing. And here I am, having cleared the entire raid.
What, you want a fucking medal?
And now I know why so many guilds fell apart.
Please say something intelligent.
It's because raiding Naxxramas is really f***ing expensive.
What an idiot.
Well, now he can at least have the authority to say what it was like to work through and clear the whole instance.
I was lucky. I joined that guild when they already cleared Naxxramas.
Do you actually think that any of us give a damn what
Hamster wheel
has to say? I'll tell you what I think. It doesn't matter what you think.
But can you imagine doing progression raiding in Naxxramas?
Yes, because I did it back when strats weren't readily available.
Where you burn through your consumables, as every single wipe would cost them hundreds of golds in consumables.
Then your guild was stupid. You potted in certain circumstances on certain bosses at certain times, depending on your gear and progression.
It wasn't just the tough fights. It was just shitload of preparations everyone had to do for each single attempt of a boss.
We'll talk about raid consumes again in a few minutes.
You needed resistance gear. Get stuff like that from the bosses that you kill, or you craft it yourself. And that crafted gear was not cheap. Not cheap at all.
No.
Now, he says you needed frost resistance gear, and yes, this is correct. However, he also says it was hard to craft, it was hard to obtain, and it was expensive. This is all false. There were 2 items per armor type that would drop throughout the instance. These were nice to have, but it was not required. To craft frost resistance gear, you needed frozen runes. Frozen runes would spawn on the walls of Naxxramas. To get these, you'd have to have a word of thawing. It was very easy to bring an alt rogue into the instance to get a couple word of thawings. They yielded 3 to 6 per rune. It's also notable that these are not bound. They can be bought, traded, loaned, stolen, scammed. Oh hey, your guild isn't on Saffron? Let us borrow your runes, and when you get to Saffron, we will repay you with extra. That kind of thing happened. Guilds who were competent farmed these after raids because they knew they were important. Guilds who were competent didn't waste these on bosses like Grand Widow Faralina. To hammer my point, here is a very blurry, because old YouTube video, of a rogue. He's in Noth the Plaguebringer's room. This is the first boss, by the way. You can skip all the trash, stealths up there, and loots it. It's that easy. All it takes is a word of thawing. It's just that easy. 3 to 6. Now, 3 to 6 is an important number. You're probably thinking, well, you know what? Maybe crafted gear took a lot of this to craft. This is where basic research would have really served him well. Every single player had the legs because there was a quest called The Only Song I Know. This quest was really important because for the low price of 2 frozen runes, you could obtain your class type leggings. That's right, 2 runes, a couple mats here and there, 30 gold. That's not expensive. In what realm is this expensive? You could get 40 resistance. He says you needed 150 to 200, which seems about right. It's been a while. I don't quite remember the exact amount needed. There's also the Glacial Cloak. Everyone could craft this. 5 runes. So yes, a jump up from the 2, but still not that expensive. 4 bolts of rune cloth, 2 waters, and 2 silk. The cloth set in general was very cheap to craft, and this was used by the majority of your raid. Paladins would wear this, shamans would wear this because it had spell damage. Aura plus quest plus this, that's 9 runes. 9 runes gets you 140 resistance. Now, it was a little bit more expensive for plate, because plate needed Arcanite bars, but still not that expensive. He's making it sound like you had to pay through the nose to get this gear, and that's really not the case. Typically, guilds would kill 4 horsemen, progress to Saffron, wouldn't have their resist gear crafted, they would just get stomped. Craft up the Frost resist, couple days progression, Saf died.
And it wasn't like you could just go to the auction house and buy a green level 55 of the frost resistance gear. No, that was...
Wow.
If your raid didn't have any shadow or nature resistance gear, it was an absolute bitch to get through the beginning parts of the Plague, Spider, and Abomination Wing.
And he would only know about the beginning parts, apparently.
You actually need to get your hands on frost resistance, nature resistance, shadow resistance, and fire resistance gear in order to properly withstand all the damage in this instance. Once again, it's not entirely true. I mean, the main resistance gear you needed was just frost for Saffron. But all the others, you know, for the trash maybe.
Whoops, my bad. You only did 25% of what I said. You did not need nature resist, fire resist, or shadow resistance. Tanks could throw it on for trash, but for the general raid, you did not need that whatsoever. Maybe Grand Widow if you suck balls at standing in fire, but you already had fire resistance from Rag anyways. You know, gargoyles are kicking your butt on Noth trash. You already have nature resistance from AQ40. I don't get the problem here. All you need is frost from a boss that he didn't see.
Let alone Loatheb. You needed resistance gear.
You didn't use shadow resistance gear on Loatheb because it would gimp your DPS. It was a DPS race mixed with a consumable rotation, which was honestly pretty cool. It made for a really interesting encounter. Nightfall came into popularity largely due to Loatheb. Some guilds had it before, but guilds finally learned that you had to min-max because of Loatheb. Yes, it sucked farming shadow pots. Get over it. It was a good fight.
You needed resistance gear to clear out trash in several wings.
You are so dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
The effect of Locust Swarm in Wrath.
So he goes into detail about the Locust Swarm debuff. The values from Vanilla and Lich King are so similar. However, Asmonbald had a very good point on this. The strategy has changed. In Vanilla, you kited, so you were not supposed to take the dot tick, while in Lich King, your tank just ate the dot. You didn't kite.
Okay, so after months and months of farming Blacking Lair, Onyxia, AQ40, and such, you finally had 40 people that were geared for Nax. Does that mean you're ready for this instance?
Yes.
Nope, of course not. You also needed a ton of consumables. Yeah, the consumables is really true. I mean, I don't know, in my guild people didn't really use that many consumables, probably because we're noobs. Maybe that's one of the reasons why we never got too far. For Naxxramas, you had no chance without consumables. Like, literally every single raid I was in during Naxxramas, everyone was like buffed up the ass with raid consumes.
Oh, wait, you serious? Let me laugh even harder.
Every raid I saw going in there when I was playing had consumables.
Yes, because it was standard practice to full buff before zoning into an instance.
And this was one of the things that really wore on me as a healer. If you were a healer and you had to farm consumables, you were screwed, because you did next to no damage to mobs. So farming was extremely slow and extremely painful.
Now let's talk about consumables. His go-to scapegoat.
Farm consumables, farming consumables was farming the consumables. Consumables, amount of consumables and herbs. Your consumables, crap load of consumables.
Okay, real talk. Tanks had it way worse. Tanks had to have the armor pots, chimera chops, flasks. Yes, guild banks would often help fund this, but still, it was expensive. Casters needed supreme power flasks. Not needed for farm content, but very helpful. On bosses like Thaddeus and Loatheb, where boss mechanics drastically increased your damage, having flasks on your casters was extremely beneficial. Healers didn't have it that bad. Let's look at what buffs healers needed. Now, there are some outliers like the Ungoro Crater Blasted Land Spirit buffs. These were not needed, only if you wanted that extra edge. Healers used Sagefish, the MP5 food, Mage Blood potions, very cheap. No flask was required. Yes, you could have a Titans for extra HP. Yes, you could have Distilled Wisdom for mana. These were not needed, ever. Distilled Wisdom was a waste of money. Mana pots, yes, these could rack up a little bit with the Dreamfoil cost. However, you could downrank to superiors or even greaters. You could just chug those. There was the rank 6 mana pots from PvP. Those were really easy to obtain. Night Dragon's Breath, easy to farm, grab a friend. Mana runes, these were kind of crappy to farm. You could buy them though. You didn't waste these. And then of course the big daddy, the resistance potions. These were used but they weren't always required. There's a lot of misinformation with these. So fire pots, 4 horsemen, that's it. You did not need these for any other boss, maybe Grand Widow if you were really, really bad at standing in fire. Other than that, useless. Nature pots, not needed. Maybe Hygen the Unclean if you're really bad at running in a straight line. Globulus, maybe, but Globulus was so easy, it didn't matter. Frost pots, yes, they were used on Saffron. Did they help? Greatly. Were they required? No. You're stuck behind an ice block and your healer's out in Africa. You could pop one, give you a little extra buffer. And of course, shadow protection potions. 3 per Lotheb kill, not that bad. Guilds took Lotheb really seriously. You did not screw around on that boss because of the gold investment. I will admit, Brave Moss farming was annoying, especially for Horde. But it is what it is. Even though it sucked wasting that much money, it was kind of annoying as a raider myself, it was a great fight. As a healer, especially, 1 heal, and then you have to DPS, you have to actually min-max DPS as a healer. Suddenly you're crafting nightfalls and stuff. It was awesome. Love it.
That's right. If you were to farm with your off-spec, you basically had to spend 60 gold to switch to that
50.
spec, and another 60 gold
50.
to eventually switch to your raiding spec. That's a total of 120 gold,
100.
which was a lot of money back in those days.
So he's saying that people had to spend gold to respec, to farm gold, and then respec back. You did that if you were a fucking idiot, yes. But you could make gold many, many different ways in vanilla. And wasting money respecing to grind mobs was pretty stupid. So what could you do to earn money? You could run dungeons, like Strath Liveside with an enchanter. Yes, you're a healer, but hey, you can still run dungeons and heal. Sell the righteous orbs, sell the disenchanting mats, split the profit. You could level an alt. Use that alt to go grind mobs. You could do GDKP. So hey, you have gear and you don't run Molten Core or Blackwing anymore. Grab some plebs, take them to the instances, and sell them the loot. It really wasn't that hard. Professions. You're bitching about potions? Well, why don't you go pick some herbs and then just craft them yourself? Or have a guildie craft them. So then he shows you himself grinding on a druid with gear. And he's not even grinding a good mob. He should have been grinding the mobs that drop grays, like the bats in EPL. You know, you got gear? Then go to wetlands or go to the badlands and farm the whelps. Skin them. Oh my god, professions!
The final step to actually getting into the instance was the attunement quest, which was a bitch on its own.
How about new, you crazy Dutch bastard?
I recently cleared the entirety of Naxxramas.
You know what gaming's really about, Brian? Boom. It's all about the game.
On a private server.
Does that game include a minigame about being full of crap?
And yes, a private server is not a 100% accurate representation of Naxxramas in vanilla WoW. That said though, a lot of aspects are still the same.
Okay, such as?
To now give you an honest review, so to say, of Naxxramas in vanilla WoW.
You already gave us a review. Was that not honest?
Because you didn't just fly to Naxxramas and there you go, you're ready to rock. Nah, every raid night in Naxxramas started at Yojamba Isle. First of all, on this isle you could trade in a reputation token for a pretty handy buff, Spirit of Zanza. And for fights where you needed a lot of HP and or mana regen, this Spirit of Zanza was an absolute necessity.
No, it wasn't. It was an added bonus if you wanted to do that, but in no way was it required ever.
Thing is, you need to be revered with the Zanlar tribe to get this, so that's another thing to take into consideration.
Not really, because anyone raiding Nax would already be exalted for the shoulders.
The second reason why everyone gathers there is the Spirit of Zanlar buff. After that, it's time to get the Rallying Cry of the Dragon Slayer buff. It's another must-have. Alright, now that everyone's in Orgrimmar, what's next? In Felwood you can cleanse flowers, and those flowers give you an extra buff. The one you're looking for is the Songflower Serenade. So then, after all that, we still have to go to the Darkmoon Fair. After doing all that, it's finally time to get a portal to the Undercity and fly to Light's Hope. Once you're in front of Naxxramas, everyone starts buffing their groups, and when that's done, it's finally time to step into Naxxramas. Now, let me be fair in saying that world buffs were not necessary for all of the bosses in Naxxramas.
You're right, not at all. You would sometimes use it on bosses like Lotheb, when you were still getting used to the DPS race, and then you'd carry it through from Lotheb to Saffron to KT.
But since we always wanted to clear the entire wing that we were doing, we always rolled with world buffs. We would always roll with world buffs. We would do one initial try to get the positioning of players right, and when we felt confident about that, we all went back to Stranglethorn Vale, and once again get the world buff so we could do KT.
You're an idiot!
And what did we do when we got back, buffed up, and wiped?
Try again?
We go right back to Stranglethorn Vale again to buff up for KT once more.
Oh, hell no!
Was Naxx 40 really that hard? Simple answer, yes, but mainly when you compare it to previous raid tiers. Compared to BWL or AQ40, the mechanics were much harder. There was a lot more you screw up, you wipe the raid or die mechanics. It was also hard to keep people interested because of the TBC announcement. I'm not going to bust my balls on this instance when I could just get free gear reset in a couple months. To complete this raid, you needed consistent attendance from your core raid group. Cycling people in and out, having to reteach strategies was a killer on guilds. So Spider Wing, super easy. Kill ads, kill boss, simple strategies. Abomination Wing, pretty simple. Thaddeus was the only quote-unquote hard boss. You just had sticky notes on your monitor that said go left or go right if you whatever player day you had. Really wasn't hard. It would take 2 to 3 people to screw up to really hurt the raid. Death Knight Wing, Resuvius is easy. Gothic wasn't that hard. You just split your raid into 2. 4 Horsemen was hard, but that's mostly due to the 8 tank cock block. How could they have reworked it? I'm not sure. I don't really like the design, but it was a fun fight. I remember fist pumping the hell out of that when we finally killed it. Plague Wing, super easy. Noth, Hygen, ads, decurs, run in a straight line. Lotheb was hard. An interesting consumable rotation mechanic, as I mentioned before. Even as a healer, you get to go balls to the wall DPS. That was cool. That was really cool. I remember crafting my first Nightfall for that. Felt great. And then, of course, there's the Frostworm Lair, Saffron, and Kel'Thuzad. Saffron wasn't that hard, actually. Sometimes you could get really RNG'd on the ice blocks, but you could work around the RNG. And typically, guilds carried world buffs into Saffron, so it wasn't that hard. And then Kel'Thuzad. Kel'Thuzad was hard. It should have been hard. It was the last boss. The guilds that I know would world buff, they'd go in, try it once with world buffs, and then just do regular attempts after that. So that's it. Was Naxx 40 really that hard? Yeah, I guess. It's not because it was expensive. That's just dumb. Well, I hope I've educated you plebs a little bit. Hopefully you guys get good. See you guys in Classic. If you like this style of content, this style of memery, let me know. Depending on the reception of this video, if it goes well, maybe I'll make more. Maybe people want to see the elitist hardcore perspective. No offense to the YouTube content creators, but you guys are casuals. You weren't there on the front lines with the hardcore guilds battling for world firsts. I was. Peace.